The rain hammered against the bus shelter like it was trying to break through, and Daniel Chen pulled his jacket tighter, checking his watch for the third time in as many minutes. 10:47 p.m. The last bus should have been here 12 minutes ago, and his daughter's birthday cake was waiting in the bakery fridge across town, paid for but not picked up. Tomorrow morning, Lily would turn 7, and he'd promised her the Princess Castle cake she'd been dreaming about for months. He was already failing at so many things as a single father. He couldn't fail at this too. That's when he noticed her. She stood at the far end of the shelter, partially hidden in shadow, but the streetlight caught her face in brief flashes. Young, maybe early 20s, with wet hair plastered to her, cheeks and clothes that looked too thin for October in Seattle. But it wasn't the rain-soaked appearance that made Daniel's breath catch. It was her eyes. Even from 15 feet away, he could see them moving constantly, scanning the empty street, the dark storefronts, the parking lot across the road. They were the eyes of prey animal, and every instinct Daniel had honed as a former ER nurse screamed that something was very, very wrong. She was bleeding. He could see it now, a thin trail of blood running down her left arm, dripping onto the concrete. Her right hand clutched her side, and the way she held herself, hunched and protective, suggested more injuries hidden beneath her jacket. She hadn't looked at him once, too focused on watching the street, and Daniel realized with a cold certainty that she wasn't waiting for a bus. She was hiding. Every logical part of his brain told him to stay put. This was Seattle at night, in a neighborhood that got sketchy after dark. He didn't know this woman. He didn't know what kind of trouble she was running from. He had a daughter at home with a babysitter who needed to leave by midnight. He had responsibilities, boundaries, a life he'd carefully rebuilt after his wife's death 3 years ago. Getting involved could mean danger, complications, police reports, court appearances. It could mean anything. But Daniel had spent 15 years in emergency rooms, and he knew what trauma looked like. He knew the difference between someone in trouble and someone who was trouble. And this woman, shivering in the corner of a bus shelter with blood on her arm and terror in her eyes, was drowning and trying not to make a sound. He stood up slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Miss," he called softly, "are you hurt?" She jerked like he'd struck her, eyes snapping to his face. For a second, he thought she might run, her whole body tensed, muscles coiling for flight. Then she seemed to really see him, a 42-year-old Asian man in a rumpled button-down and khakis, with kind eyes and graying hair, holding a briefcase and looking about as dangerous as a golden retriever. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice shook so badly the words barely held together. "I'm just waiting for someone." "You're bleeding," Daniel said gently, taking a small step closer. "That cut on your arm needs attention." "I'm a nurse. Well, I used to be. I work in hospital administration now, but I still know how to treat a wound. Will you let me help?" "No." The word came out sharp, defensive. "Thank you, but no. Please, just leave me alone." Daniel should have listened, should have respected her wishes, gotten on his bus when it came, and gone home to his daughter. But then a car turned onto the street, and the woman's reaction told him everything he needed to know. She pressed herself against the back of the shelter, making herself as small as possible, and the fear that flooded her face was so raw, so absolute that Daniel felt it like a physical blow. The car passed without slowing, and she let out a shaky breath. "Who are you hiding from?" Daniel asked quietly. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Rain drummed on the shelter's metal roof. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Then she spoke, and her voice was so small Daniel had to strain to hear it. "My boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, I tried to leave him tonight. He came home drunk and started hitting me, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't. So I fought back and ran. But he's looking for me. I know he is. He has my phone, my wallet, everything. I don't even know where to go." The admission seemed to break something in her. She sank down onto the bench, and Daniel could see she was shaking. Whether from cold or shock or both, the blood on her arm was dripping faster now. "What's your name?" Daniel asked, sitting down carefully on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining distance. "Jessica? Jessica, I'm Daniel, and I think you need to go to a hospital. Those injuries need proper treatment, and you might have internal damage you're not aware of yet." "I can't." Jessica wrapped her arms around herself. "The hospital will call the police. They'll make me file a report. And if they do that, if Brandon gets arrested, when he gets out, he'll kill me. He told me that. He said if I ever tried to leave or tell anyone, he'd make sure I never breathed another word. I believe him. Daniel recognized the logic of abuse, the way it trapped victims in impossible situations where every choice seemed like the wrong one. He'd seen it countless times. In the ER, people who came in with obvious signs of violence but insisted they'd fallen or walked into a door. The fear was a cage, and the abuser held the key. Okay, Daniel said slowly. Then let's take this one step at a time. First, you need to get warm and dry, and we need to stop that bleeding. My apartment is 6 blocks from here. I have a 7-year-old daughter and a babysitter there, so you'd be completely safe. You can clean up, I can treat your injuries, and then we can figure out next steps. No pressure, no police unless you want them. Just somewhere safe for tonight. Jessica looked at him with an expression that broke. His heart, desperate hope warring, with bone-deep distrust. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Because you need help, Daniel said simply. And because I have a daughter, and I hope if she's ever in trouble, someone would do the same for her. The bus pulled up then, doors hissing open. The driver looked at them expectantly. Daniel stood, but he didn't move toward the bus. He held out his hand to Jessica instead. It's your choice, he said. But you don't have to be alone tonight. Jessica stared at his outstretched hand for what felt like an eternity. The bus driver honked impatiently, and then slowly she reached out and took it. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of careful triage and quiet conversation. Daniel's babysitter, Rosa, took one look at Jessica and immediately went into grandmother mode, making tea and finding dry clothes while Daniel cleaned and bandaged her injuries. 3 cracked ribs, a deep laceration on her arm that should have had stitches, but Daniel butterfly bandaged as best he could, bruises covering her torso and a sprained wrist. She was lucky it wasn't worse. Lily woke up around midnight, drawn by unfamiliar voices. She stood in her doorway in her unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, who's that? This is Miss Jessica, Daniel said softly. She had some trouble tonight, so she's going to stay with us. Is that okay? Lily studied Jessica with the solemn intensity only children can manage. Then she patted over and held out her favorite stuffed elephant. Mr. Trunks always makes me feel better when I'm sad. You can borrow him tonight. Jessica's composure, which had held through everything else, finally shattered. She took the elephant with trembling hands and started to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and wounded. Lily, with the emotional intelligence that continued to amaze her father, simply climbed onto the couch and hugged her. Over the next 2 days, Daniel's apartment became a refuge. He called in sick to work, something he never did. He contacted a women's shelter his hospital partnered with and spoke to an advocate who specialized in domestic violence cases. Jessica talked to a lawyer who helped her understand her options. Slowly, carefully. They built a plan that didn't involve her going back or living in fear. On the 3rd morning, as Jessica was preparing to move to the shelter where she'd be safe and could start rebuilding her life, she found Daniel in the kitchen making Lily's breakfast. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You risked so much for a stranger. You gave up your time, your safety, your peace of mind. Why? Daniel thought about his wife, Sarah, who'd spent her career as a social worker helping people nobody else wanted to help. He thought about the values he wanted to teach. Lily. He thought about the kind of world he wanted to live in. My wife used to say that humanity isn't something we're born with, it's something we choose every day in 1,000 small moments. When we see someone hurting and we have the power to help, that's a moment of choice. We can look away and protect ourselves, or we can reach out and risk being human. He smiled. She was right. I've never regretted choosing to help someone, but I've always regretted the times I walked away. Jessica wiped her eyes. Your daughter is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She reminds me why kindness matters. 6 months later, Daniel received a letter. Jessica had found a job, started therapy, and moved into her own apartment. She'd reconnected with her family, whom her ex had isolated her from. She was building a life that was hers again. She enclosed a photo of herself, smiling, really smiling, and a note that simply said, You showed me that the world still had good people in it. Thank you for being brave enough to care. Daniel pinned the photo to his refrigerator, next to Lily's drawings and school awards. That night, as he tucked his daughter into bed, she asked him, "Daddy, is Miss Jessica doing better?" "She is, sweetheart." "Good, I liked her. Are you going to help more people who are scared?" Daniel kissed her forehead. "If I can, yes." "Me too," Lily said sleepily. "When I grow up, I want to help people like you and Mommy did." And in that moment, Daniel understood that the ripples of kindness spread farther than we could ever see, touching lives and shaping futures in ways we might never fully know. All it took was one person willing to notice, to care, to act when someone else couldn't ask for help. Sometimes saving the world meant saving just one person, and sometimes that was enough.